Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm your host, Connor King Roberts, with another episode of the Pivot Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs across the tech industry. Today, I'm excited to introduce a special VIP guest, Jeff Lerner, founder and CEO of Noma Marketing. He's been in the industry for the last 25 years. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So I know we spoke a little bit about this before the episode got going, but if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners like a 2 to 3 minute breakdown of what you do and who you serve, that would be amazing.
Sure. So I serve as a fractional CMO or boutique strategy consultant for startups with their brand development, their go-to-market strategy, their points of differentiation, and then putting together marketing plans and executing marketing plans that really help drive both revenue growth, customer acquisition, but almost more importantly, long-term brand awareness and affinity.
Gotcha. Okay. That was a that was a good summary. You've got that dialed in.
I
And
mean,
I
I'm
guess
happy to dive deeper, in any one of those points. But yeah, I mean, I strategically, when startups have issues or challenges with their business, when they're at the point of either they've hit some wall that they can't seem to get through, or they're just first going to market, that's where they tap me on the shoulder and say, really, how can you help us reach that next level of their growth?
totally. Okay, gotcha. And from your experience, like what have you seen? How do startups hit that sort of dead ends? Like are they getting something wrong? Are they relying too much on a certain department, throwing money at it? What have you seen in your experience and how do you solve for that?
Yeah, I think one of the most common things that I've seen is that there's kind of a lack of brand, right? There's a product or a solution, and there's often a sales team that's being tasked with going out there and selling it.
Mm,
And that's great in like the hypothetical sense, right? But the reality is when organizations themselves don't have a brand, when internally they don't know how to speak about themselves, and certainly when that happens externally, they don't know how to speak about who they are and what they do, but most importantly, why they do it, then sales teams can inevitably hit that wall, right? Like they can find the low-hanging fruit of, tapping into a few different areas where they can close some deals and grow the business. But when an organization, and this is hands down number one challenge that startups face, is they think good product equals brand, and as I've told you, and I use this analogy all the time, a brand is not about the solution. A brand is about how it's going to make someone feel about your solution, your product, et cetera. And the perfect example is Nike and Reebok, back in the 90s, right? Like they both had basketball shoes. They both, are in the footwear space. Like their product set is very similar, but they are
totally.
massively different in terms of their brand and how you feel if you're wearing Nikes or if you're wearing Reeboks, if you're wearing, Air Jordans, was it's again the whole reason why Air Jordan became a sub brand of Nike is because it added this element of, the most dominant player of his era, like this championship, pedigree. You put those on and like you're something more special. And that's what startups get a little bit wrong is that they're just kind of like, hey, we have sneakers. Why are we not selling our sneakers? And what I do is I come in and say, it's great that you have a sneaker, but let's really focus on how is someone going to feel about having those, telling their friends they have them, wearing them, showing them off, and crafting the narrative and the story to get their target audience to want to have it, to want to use it, to want to tell anybody that they know how great it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you've been in, the tech space for the last 25 years. You've been working with startups pretty exclusively for the last 10. Um, at this point, do you have sort of like a standard methodology that you follow when you go in to, revamp these startups? Or is it not one size fits all and you kind of start from the ground up with everyone that you work with? I'm curious because, it sounds like quite a heavy lift on your end being able to position them as a brand that people know and make their end consumer feel a certain way, that's a lot. So I'm curious how you go about that.
Yeah, so my process is the same in terms of like what the starting point is, right? Which
Mhm.
is a comprehensive brand analysis. So it's really a deep dive, an assessment of the brand in terms of current, messaging and positioning, the competitive set. I do a SWOT analysis to really help pinpoint, some of the opportunities and threats that they may have, both real and perceived. So like that's my starting point
Yeah,
because I think it really sets a good baseline for everything. But where I go from there is completely customized based on what I find in that assessment and the conversations I have with, the founders and the organization. I do not have a cookie cutter approach of like step one, I'm going to do this, step two, that, step three, this. Um, that's not, from my experience, like no two startups are the same. So why
yeah,
should my process be the same?
yeah.
Um, so once I have the baseline and the understanding and I've aligned with leadership on what the goals are, then I can look to kind of marry all the things together to create the plan and the strategy that's going to help propel them, both short and long term.
Awesome. That totally makes sense that, you want to connect with leadership, understand what their issues are, like where their needs are so that you can like best fill them. And then I wouldn't be surprised if oftentimes you see some things that are missing that maybe they don't even see presently at the time. Um, my next question, and I think this makes sense just because it's changed a lot of things, especially in the last year or two, but AI is everywhere. Has that become a tool that you use in your process? And again, you said it's unique every single time. But if so, how are you utilizing it?
Yeah, AI, I mean, it's changing everything. Every industry, is somehow being touched, by AI, and
Truly.
it's a positive.
Yeah.
It's a positive in the sense, I mean, I certainly use it to help, with understanding certain strategies, or I may look to it to take a complex idea and simplify it for me, or a variety of different integrations and tools that really can help also understand user behavior on websites and other things. So there's a vast network of solutions in the AI space that really do help me and my clients. And in fact, quite a few of my clients are in the AI space themselves. What's challenging about the AI space is, I think back 5, 7, 10 years ago, and every company was using technology as part of you know branding themselves or talking about themselves.
Right.
And I even posted on LinkedIn recently, how one of the companies that was selling flushable wipes for, flushable wipes,
Yeah.
and they have their whole thing was like, with our Sure Flush technology, which makes you think like they're trying to promote like as if the wipe itself like is filled with like a microchip and other things. But everybody talked about technology because that was the buzzword that every organization was using to try and differentiate, but they in fact didn't differentiate by using it because everybody else was doing the same thing. And we're starting to see that now, where companies promote themselves of like, we have our next gen advanced AI solution to do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that's real. And there is a significant investment in AI and some technology. And sometimes it's literally just we've integrated with ChatGPT and that's, our solution. And so as a marketer, it really is an added challenge for me to cut through that noise to help my clients who are in fact in that AI space to really tell the messaging of we're not just chat GPT enabled. We in fact do things differently and here's why.
Gotcha. So that's really interesting because it's helpful internally for like yourself and your team and like perhaps optimizing things. But then from a branding and marketing perspective, you do have to address that when you're building out sort of your plan for these startups. So that's interesting to hear like two sides of the coin from a marketing perspective.
Yep.
Also, being in San Francisco, I'd be shocked if you can walk down the street and see a billboard that doesn't include AI on it. It's actually
Exactly.
insane. So I knew you were going with that. I was like, yep, it's AI. That's the new buzzword. Everyone and
Right.
their mom is just, yeah,
Exactly. And look, I think it's almost, one of those things where junior marketing teams or agencies, it's almost like there's a speed to market where they're trying to, but it's not speed to market of a product. They're trying to be first to market with like the marketing messaging. If we put it out first that we're AI this or AI that, then everyone will think we're the ones, that did that. But I think that ship has sailed already. We've already now reached the point, like you said, of oversaturation of AI that agencies and other marketers, especially brand builders, like now need to think harder and smarter about how to differentiate in that space.
totally. Yeah, that I would agree. Um, to bring it back a little bit, you've been working with startups for the last 10 years, and I would say you're, successful, established. What would you say if there was a time where you faced like some sort of adversity with yourself and the business? How did you overcome that? And any lessons learned from that experience?
There are lessons to be learned every day.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about being a fractional CMO is I meet new people all the time. I get exposed to new businesses all the time. I see unique challenges all the time. Um, and it gives me an opportunity to learn and to grow.
Mhm.
Um, one of the things, I love feedback. And so when people give me feedback, whether they're clients of mine or potential clients that chose not to hire me for whatever reason, it's understanding feedback and taking that in. And when I first started my business and decided to go out on my own and to really focus on building this for me, um, I tended to try and just highlight and articulate what I do. It was about me. And I was struggling a little bit, on the business. And as a marketer, I knew better, but I didn't know better from a how to sell like a person, in terms of like it was me, it was my business. So I would talk about myself, but not well, because I find talking about myself to be very awkward. And it took feedback from a potential client who literally sent me an email that was like, "Hey, Jeff, you've got great experience, great background. I really enjoyed talking to you. Um, but I just didn't feel like you either A, are sure that this is what you want to do, meaning be a fractional CMO and do these things. And B, you were also a little bit too focused on trying to validate yourself that you didn't really validate us as
Mm.
a potential client for you." And I called this guy immediately and said, "My goodness, this was the greatest feedback. Could you tell me more?"
Yeah, keep
And
going, please.
like he went into detail of like, and he said, he's like, "Look, I could tell like you don't want to talk about yourself and you just kind of want to like say, here's my background, like take this information and hopefully you think this is worthwhile." I had imposter syndrome, like hands down, total imposter syndrome. But more importantly, because of it, even though I am an extrovert and I love speaking at events and doing things and being in front of people, I felt that those one-to-one like sales calls were just very awkward for me. I was like, I'm talking to a CEO and a founder of a startup. Should I be in the room with this person really pitching my services? And so I had a hard time talking about me and I didn't spend enough time talking about them. And he walked me through in detail all the things that I could have done better on that call. And that completely changed how I approach my business. It completely changed my storytelling. I've spent a lot of time working with experts to really help me craft that and be better at it. And I went back to him 6 months later and sent him a a video, a recording of one of my sales pitches to another potential client who I got permission to share it. And
Nice.
he said, "Jeff, this is night and day different from what we did 6 months ago to where you are now." And so it was so validating to kind of get that feedback.
Yeah, yeah, that must have felt good. And isn't it funny how sometimes just hearing that from like an outside source and like someone that you like trust can just like change everything, whether it's like
Oh, true.
constructive criticism, something that you just needed to hear, like validation. And then you're like, I could have probably just told myself this the whole time, but like that hit in a light that I wouldn't have seen it in otherwise. And I guess in that same sort of vein, how important has networking and connection building been for you in your career and the
It's
business?
essential. Not to plug it because I didn't write it for this reason, but I wrote a book
Nice.
about 10 years ago, 11 years ago called The Power of Relationships in Professional Growth.
Awesome.
And the book was really about all of those lessons that I wish I had been taught about how important networking is
Hmm.
earlier on in my career. You know, for so many of us, we kind of thought, oh, well, if I'm connected to someone on LinkedIn, they're just going to hire me. Or if I know someone at this company that, you know, whatever it is, and they make an introduction for me, like I'll get hired.
Hmm.
That was the path. And it's true that it's not always what you know, it's who you know, but it's more importantly, it's who will speak about you when you're not even in the room. And that's what I lead with. And that's been part of my growth plan is I want people to speak about me when I'm not in the room, where if, you know, John and Ted are having a conversation and John says, you know, yeah, my company's really struggling with X, Y, and Z. I want Ted to say, you know what? I know someone who might be able to help. Let me introduce you to Jeff. And that's why my business has been 95% referral based, you know, over the course of the last 5, 6 years, because I'm getting referred from my existing clients to others and just other people who know me and want to vouch for me when I'm not even in the room.
Yeah, that's really huge actually. 95% of your business referral based. That's that's ideal, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah, and on that same topic, that's actually a psychology technique. If you speak highly of someone when they're not in the room, so like speak highly of them behind their back, which is obviously the opposite of like the classic trope, like talking S behind people's backs. Others will associate you with those positive things that you're saying, just because you're painting someone else in a good light. So like they associate it with you. It's just a
Yep.
strange kind of thing, but
So
yeah,
true.
yeah, it is true. Also, just being a good person helps. So,
That's also true. Yeah.
yeah, I guess in a industry like tech and marketing, it's changing all the time, especially with the rise of AI. We've talked about that. Where would you say that your industry is going in the next 2 years? Just because I feel like 5 years even would just be a whole other ball game, but like 2 years from now, and where would you say you and your business are going to kind of stay ahead of that curve?
Yeah, it's a great question because a few years ago, if somebody would have asked, like, I don't think I would have kind of predicted the role that AI has played in marketing.
Hmm.
You know, it while I knew it certainly to be a possibility, and it certainly was discussed at some point, this idea that I could go to a website, put in some prompt of, you know, Mickey Mouse, you know, standing on the moon, holding a bottle of, you know, tequila, whatever, and like, instantly I could get a professional looking image of just
Crazy.
that, like, blows my mind, right? Like that's even a thing. Um, and so I think we're just scratching the surface on how AI and technology are going to transform design.
Hmm.
Because now the possibilities are limitless in terms of, you know, design elements. It's not surprising that there are companies out there that I could go to and put in a prompt and say, build me a website that looks like this other one or whatever it may be. But then using ChatGPT or whatever their integration is, research, you know, anything you can about a company in the marketing space. So like you give it a few different prompts and like, boom, you're getting, you know, this output that's better than what, you know, many humans would have been able to generate.
Totally.
So
And
that's inspiring and great. On the other side, though, and I'll just be quick about this point, is everyone, or there's a lot of conversation about AI and technology replacing that human side of things, and across so
There
many
is.
different industries.
Yeah.
But in marketing and in brand development, which is an art and psychology type of role, almost equally as it is a marketing technology kind of role, the human element is vital because everything that I do as a marketer and a brand builder is to generate emotions in other humans.
Hmm.
And while AI is great at taking an input and coming up with an output, AI is not, doesn't understand or grasp the psychology of things in a way that I and so many other great brand builders really do understand and grasp to tell the narrative and the story to elicit the response that we want to get from another human. So, marketing and branding is still a human centric touch point. We just have better tools now to really help us do it.
Totally. And I believe that to be true as well. I don't think AI is going to be able to fully replace something that you do because, again, it elicits an emotion. Um, at least that is what I'm 100% going to choose to believe because I don't like
Yeah.
the other option that's scary to me. And I know we've already talked about this a little bit, but like inducing an emotion from someone, that's something like difficult to do. So do you feel like you've got it, you know, dialed in now? Obviously, your process is different with every startup you work with, but like in the end, you are getting results for your clients. So different journey every time, but you got it down at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's testing, it's iterating, it's what I do is after I've done that analysis, I start hypothesizing. What are the triggers? What are the emotions? What are the things that we can be thinking about
Hmm.
to try and get that reaction that we want? And then we start implementing and testing them and we see what sticks, right? Like there are plenty of times, and I had this conversation yesterday with a client where I even said, I'm like, look, on the surface, I don't think this message will resonate and create the reaction that you're hoping for,
Hmm.
but I'm willing to test it because there have been plenty of times in my career where I've said the same thing where I'm like, hey, I don't think that's going to work. And it has, right? So, like, it's the whole idea of I don't want to or need to or expect to be the smartest one in the room who knows how everything is going to land with a target audience. That's not my job. My job is to leverage my experience, the best practices that I have in helping to formulate the hypotheses that we can then test and validate and iterate on to continuously drive success.
Hmm.
It's not a we're going to hit one thing right, flip a switch, overnight success, and we never have to worry about it again.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That definitely helps to break it down and humanize the process more. And that totally makes sense. Last few questions for you here. What advice would you give to like an aspiring leader following either like in your industry, whether as an entrepreneur, consultant, or industry expert? What advice would you give to, I guess, get to where you are currently?
The first one is, ask, sometimes beg for feedback.
Hmm.
Like I said, it completely changed the direction of my business and what I was doing because it was somebody else who was willing to shine a spotlight on me and say, "Hey Jeff, this is not going to work for you in the long run if this is, how you continuously, are thinking about things." And so I think that in and of itself was so vital and now why I ask for feedback any chance I get, whether it be a prospect or a client. So I'll reach out, if there's somebody I talked to and for whatever reason didn't win that business,
Hmm.
I'll reach out and be like, hey, is there anything I could have done better? Is there a reason? And it's great when they tell me if there's literally something specific I could have done, because that's what will help me continuously grow.
Yeah,
Um, the other thing I would say is expect to fail, which is, we've all done. Um, but most importantly is learn from those failures. Just don't make those mistakes again.
true.
I've failed countless times. I've made mistakes. I've done things wrong, poorly, differently. I've been screwed out of a whole bunch of money because my contract wasn't as airtight as I thought it would be. So
Dang.
there's a variety of things, right? And it's gonna happen. Don't give up. Just learn from it, move on, and make sure it doesn't happen to you again.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I couldn't agree more. Like win or learn is usually the key there that I try and stick by.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing about yourself and your business. So now that we've talked shop for a while, there is a game that I like to play with everyone on the podcast.
Okay.
It's called super simple. It's called the lightning round. So I won't tell you what it's about, but it's just like 10 quick questions, and you can just give me the first answer that you think of. Ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, cool. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Gotcha. Same. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Morning person or night owl?
Neither.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd ra- I'd ra- uh, I don't neither, but I'm always up early and awake late, so but I guess I'd rather be up late. So I'll go with that.
Okay. Gotcha. If you could grab one weapon or item during a zombie apocalypse, what would it be?
Machete.
Gotcha. So we're gonna let them get close, and then it's reusable. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's not a finite number. I can't, number of bullets or whatever
Yeah.
it is. It's something I can, keep with me.
Gotcha. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
The ability to like teleport.
I'm right there with you, and I've always said that. It doesn't give you too much responsibility, but it is like so convenient as well.
Yep.
So I totally agree with you. Favorite movie or streaming series?
My favorite movie of all time is probably a toss-up between Clue,
Wow.
and there's an old 1950s version of the play 12 Angry Men.
Okay.
And it's a courtroom drama-ish, but that is one of my favorite movies of all time. Absolute classic.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a fairly deep cut, and I'm gonna need to go check out both of those movies because I don't think I've seen Clue in its entirety. So that's a good recommendation. Favorite book?
I mean, do I have to say the one that I wrote? But no. Um,
If you like.
no, I don't have a favorite book because just like a movie and other things, like depends on what I'm looking for. There are books that, I don't know. But if I guess I would say I loved reading Shawshank Redemption.
Mm,
So I'll go with that.
gotcha. And then if you have a favorite saying or quote that you think about often,
Yeah, so my wife actually got me a plaque. It's on my desk underneath me, and it says "Do epic shit."
that is so sick. Was that like a mantra or something that your wife thought you would just appreciate?
It was. I mean, I think she simplified what I would normally just spend time trying to say I wanted to do, and so
Totally.
yeah, so she got me that, and to sit on my desk.
I love that. That's really thoughtful. One bucket list item you've already accomplished.
Oh, start my own business.
Yeah.
Yeah, hands down. Like, always wanted to do it, and now I have.
And now I'm here. I love that.
Yep.
One bucket list item you have not accomplished yet.
I want to visit more. I want to travel more. I want to visit at least like 10 new countries. Um, you know, so that's kind of like my goal. I want to hit at least 10 new countries I've never been to, like over the next, 10, 15 years.
Totally. I would say I'm right there with you. Traveling is awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. You nailed that. And Jeff, for any of our viewers out there that want to connect, collaborate, or even work with you, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah. They can visit misunderstand.co, or they can certainly email me, Jeff@misunderstand.co, or find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. And I'm going to include your contact information in the show notes just right below this episode to just make it nice and simple.
Perfect.
Otherwise, we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
No, pleasure's been mine. Thank you for having me.